Okay.
All right. Welcome to the contracts class, everybody. This is going to be on the buy-sell contracts and what documents you need. And as you see, the documents you need for the loop, or not your loop, but what you see when you have to put a buyer under contract, the first three you need almost immediately so that you can have that signed at your buyer consultation. So you'll need your definitions of working relationship, your exclusive right to list, which is your buyer agency agreement. And on that buyer agency agreement, I would encourage you to put your buyer's legal name on that. And that way we have everything that you might need as the transaction goes forth. Again, buyer advisory has to be done with their legal names along with the definitions. This way, when you have a contract and you have go to do the contract, you've already got their names. The documents you need when you go under contract is a lender letter. You need an MLS printout sheet that shows that it's under contract. You get a public records, which will show the seller's name. If you do your buy-sell contract, you've got a counter if needed. You have a copy of your earnest money receipt, and these days there is wiring. So if you get a copy that the earnest money was wired in directly, just upload that. Then you need your inspection, objection, and resolution. You can put in at the bottom your inspection report, or on the side under custom folders. You can put that report in there. You will get from the selling agent the seller's property disclosure, square foot, and water source. Sometimes you will not get a water source from the other side because it's in your seller's property disclosure, but it's nice if you have one to give to your buyers. Closing instructions should always be put together. You never sign the only documents you sign are the Colorado State approved closing instructions. Any and all amendments. You don't do green sheets anymore. You do commissions on command. You put in commissions, you'll do that green sheet, and then Patricia will, from your commission situation, do your DA. You might have a lead-based paint disclosure. You could have a post-closing occupancy agreement. You could have earned a promissory note. We don't normally have. Commission agreements are usually from new home builders or possibly for sale by owner. Short sales, we haven't used those in a while, but we could. Now, under closing instructions, closing folder, you get an email from the closing company. And what I want you to know is please add in any documents that you've got that come from the closing, and a copy of the check and a copy of the MLS printout sheet. That way you have all things that'll be uploaded into that closing folder in command. Your next portion of your documents are going to be definitions of working relationship. That is so that you tell the buyer, I represent you as a agent. You end up putting all of your documents. You have your legal name of your buyer. So buyer sign, what date did you talk to them, and then you provided it to them, and what method did you provide that to them. Your name and your signature will always, it's automatically uploaded through CTME. The next document you've got is your buyer advisory. This is the document that Davian puts together, which is our in-house attorney. It talks about earnest money, talks about wire fraud, it talks about insurance, home warranties, and many things. Please familiarize yourself with this document. This document would help your buyers understand these are things that could happen and be aware of it. And they also talk about any kind of inspections and FERPA, which is a Foreign National Act. This will be all self-explanatory for them. These are the three documents. Well, the third document is the buyer is the buyer agency document, exclusive right to buy listing agreement or contract. Keep going through. Yep. Okay, this document, you always check the first box. Hopefully you're not representing too many people as a transaction broker. It's a rare thing these days. On number 2.1, you always check the box that says multiple person company. On number 3, you put in the buyer's legal name, 3.1. The agency in your name will be filled out. Please note that 3.4 needs to be stated as I have. Here is buyer's next residence, whether from MLS, multi-listing service, FSBOs, for sale by owners, property, investment, or new homes. Put that in there because that will allow you to be sure that you are going to be able to get paid. You go down to 3.6 is your listing period. And this listing period, always I would put in 6 months. Right now I might do 9 because it might be more difficult to find properties for a while. Go down to 3.8.2. This is will or will not. If you want to extend it, fine. If you don't, that's okay too. The next one is your broker relationship. This explains to you what this relationship is, and that you only at the very bottom on 4.3.1.2, buyer agency, this is the one you want to check. Going over to paragraph 5, this is a list of all your brokerage duties. You cannot vary from this. This has to have everything in here you need to try to do. These are your duties. As an agent. It's your overall duties as an agent. When you go to paragraph 6, that is your 3 additional duties when you check the box at the top of the document. This document, so the 3 additional duties, if you're going to get fired as a buyer agent, it's probably because the buyers feel you haven't done one of those 3 things. With that said, you go to paragraph 7, that's your compensation. 7.11, success fee. 7.1111 is where you put 2.8. 7.112, you want to check others and put this statement in here. Any bonuses or any greater commission shall be paid to Keller Williams LLC, Keller Williams Real Estate LLC at the time of closing. This allows you to be able to get a higher percentage from a builder, like 3 or 4%, or get a bonus to trip to wherever, that kind of thing. If you don't put this in here legally, you're not entitled to those extra dollars. So you want to be sure you always put this in there. Then you go down to paragraph 7.1.4. I don't have any other compensations at this time. But you can put that statement down there if you want, but it is something that you should always put in to be sure that if you have a builder who's paying 5% on something that's going to close out at the end of the year, that you've got yourself covered for that. Now go over to paragraph 7.2.4. This is the when earned and when about a lease. I always put down at the time of lease, and there will be a fee paid. And again, on the very bottom of that paragraph, at the time of lease. The reason you do that is you're not in the leasing business, but you might get paid to lease something. So you want to be sure that you're covered on that. Then on 7.3.1, listing brokerage firm or seller must pay, buyer is obligated to pay. Please always check that. If there's pushback, you can discuss it with your buyer, but you always want to check that one first. 7.4 is your holdover period. You want to put 90 to 100 days, whichever your computer will allow, and yes, you will get paid. Now, here's the deal. If you break, your buyer goes away, you keep a list of the properties that you showed them, and they go back and they buy a property you showed them, then you will pursue on how to get paid from that sale, because it's a list that we want to be sure you've submitted to those buyers. Say, hey, listen, we've given you that, we put that together, we saw that house, and we will fight to get that back as long as you want to do that. Then on paragraph 9 is obligated, you're going to conduct all negotiations for the property only through the broker. The buyer can't go and knock on the seller's door and say, hey, let me negotiate this. Can't do that. Now we're going to go down to paragraph 21. Let me see. Sorry, I'm on the wrong page. Going to paragraph 10.2. All the way down, go to paragraph 12. If the brokerage services follow additional tasks will be performed by broker. I would not obligate yourself to anything at this point. There might be something you could do that might say, hey, I'm going to go video a house or something of that nature. But right now, it's none at this time. Number 12.2 is the showings. As per the MLS instructions, that is more important now than ever before. MLS listing services in the Denver metro area, or you could say, hey, Northern Colorado under IRIS or South under PPA. If they're not going there, you don't need to put it in there. Then on 13, yes, you're going to disclose who you are. A lot of people who are high profile do not want their disclosures of who might be seeing this property until they pick one that they're going to make an offer on. 14 and 15 and 16 is telling you about different things, wiring fraud, discrimination, those types of things. 18, you want to consult your legal counsel and tax consultant, and that is to be sure that the buyer is not doing anything that's going to jeopardize their tax status. Like a 1031 exchange, there are dates and timelines that have to be met. 21, there's nothing at this point, but 21 would be where you might want to put in the name of your transaction coordinator. This way you have a name and a phone number and state that they are handling paperwork for you. They're being paid by you. 22 is your attachments. Buyer advisory, definitions of working relationship. You want to be sure that you put those two documents in there. And then 23 all the way down to 28, which is Megan's Law, is where the buyer signed, and your signature should already be on there. These are the first, all three documents. These documents are the first three documents you put together when you're meeting with a buyer in a buyer consultation. Go over it, make sure they are comfortable, and then have them sign it before, if possible, before you go look at a house. In normal times, that would be good, but you might want to do buyer consultation over your video and make sure you email it to them and make sure they call you before they sign it. That way they're comfortable. Our next document we're dealing with is the buy-sell document, which is the instrument in which you perform, put an offer into a contract. Number 2 is the buyer's name, legal name, and you want to put that in, along with how are they taking their tenancy, joint tenants, tenants in common, or other. Other is subtlety for somebody who is single, but if you're married, normally it's joint tenants. If it's a second marriage, it could be tenants in common, but that is something you want to discuss with them and be sure you understand what it is. Number 2.3 is the seller's name, which you get out of realist tax. That is the legal name of the whoever is on that property, and the legal description and confirming the address of that property. Again, number 2.4 is the legal, what county, put the legal in, and the address of the property. Number 2.5.1 is inclusions, and where you see the number of garage door openers included, please put a number. If you see a 1 garage, put 1. If you see 2, 2. This 3, 3. This way you know how many are supposed to be left at the house. If not, then request it. So you can double check that prior to closing to make sure that those garage door openers will be left at the house. Then below that line, if checked following are owned by the seller, including leased items should be listed below. So if you don't have solar panels, water softener, security system, or satellite system, check the box none if there's nothing in the house with those 4 things in there. Not included, it lists there. 2.5.3 is personal conveyance of property, which at this time, with encumbrances, the exception is none. This way that there are not any liens against that brand new stainless steel refrigerator that's in the kitchen. 2.5.4 are other inclusions. This is where you list the freestanding gas stove, the refrigerator. If you know the brand, put it in there. Make sure you put in where it's located. Brand new stainless refrigerators have a tendency to walk out the door and a purple one in its place. 2.5.5, this is a document that I have you put in, or this is a paragraph I have you fill out. It's not so much for a house. I know it's a 3-car garage and I know the shed in the backyard. But what if you're buying a condo? What if you're buying a townhome? And you want to know, is there reserved parking spaces? How many? Where is it? Those types of things. You have a storage closet next to a condo on the patio. You want to make sure that's included. 2.6 are things that are excluded. Washer, dryer located in the upstairs laundry room, the wine refrigerator in the basement, any of those types of things. 2.7 are water rights. Most of the time, you're not going to have anything, so you put the word none. Do not, under any circumstances, put NAs. At this point, you want to be sure you read the paragraph and put none, okay, all the way down. Now we're at dates and deadlines, which we will do next Monday. So let's skip down to paragraph 4. Paragraph 4 is what your buyers are going to offer. 4 says, hey, I'm going to offer $350, and I'm going to put it in there. Now, this is at this point, you should have already got your letter from your lender. You know what type of loan they're going to have and what they're putting down. So from the earnest money, that is something you get from the MLS printout sheet that says, okay, $3,000 is going to go to land title. You get that off of your MLS printout sheet and making sure that that's who's going to hold that earnest money. And again, it can be wired. So you put down what their new loan is. They're putting 20% down on a $350. You put that cash at closing. Column A and column B have to add up to the same numbers, so please make sure you do your math properly. Then you go down to 4.2 is seller concession. Please put a 0 in there if you aren't asking for anything. If you're asking for $1,000, then put that in there. 4.3 is where the earnest money, what are you doing? You could be putting in a personal check. You might be wiring it to say land title. You've got different dates and deadlines. It's telling you in this paragraph what happens. You have to get good funds at closing. You've got to be sure you have, we'll talk about the alternative earnest money deadline next week. You are going to say the buyer represents the buyer is as of this date, does or does not have the funds. Let me explain that. If a buyer has a renting and they got money in their savings account and they're getting a loan, they do. If your buyer has a house under contract and that has not closed yet and all their money is tied up in that house they're selling and closing, you do not have the money at that time. If you check the wrong box, it could be construed as loan fraud. Okay, now we're going to go to paragraph 4.5.3, loan limitation. Okay, buyer's getting a loan. He's going to do a conventional, or he's going to do FHA, VA. We don't do bond in most of the time, not other. Please do not check more than one. When the buyer qualifies, the lender will tell you what kind of loan they're going to get. If they're not sure and they could get an FHA or conventional, check FHA, because there are costs involved to a buyer that a seller is going to be obligated for. Now, if you want to check conventional and they switch to FHA, you as the agent may pay it. It may be anywhere from $50 to $350 in dollar that a seller might have to pay. You can't change the rules of the game once the contract has been consummated. Number 5, this is very important. This is the new loan application. That first paragraph in 5.1 is, I've made my loan application. It is not completed until they have a legal address and a legal description of a property. So when we go to dates next week, you can't put down complete or done or anything like that. There has to say the next day. That way they are completed with their loan application when your your offer has been accepted. That's when it's completed. 5.2 is your most important date. You have to be sure that that date is followed and made sure that it is on time. And if it isn't, try to get an extension. Sellers, you have to act in good faith. The terms and conditions are what allows this buyer to say, I don't want anything, but you have to act in good faith. You can't just say, I don't like it. But you've got to be honest about what it is going to happen and how good the buyers want this deal. Appraisal. On appraisal, on a conventional, you always put your dates. I would always put the dates in there regardless of if you have an FHA or VA. FHA and VA are different appraisers, so they may, it may take longer. But this way, if you put a date in, we're trying to keep everybody on track and everybody keeps going to the level that they're supposed to and on time as they're supposed to. You will have appraisal objections you have to resolve. You need to send the other party a copy of that objection along with a copy of the appraisal and try to resolve by dates that we'll talk about next week. Then on 6.2.2, where you see the 0, that is where you put a number that you have on paragraph 4. So it's $350 in there. If it's an FHA loan, $350. If you get a counter, make sure this paragraph has been countered also. The appraisers look at this. If it's an FHA loan, they look at this paragraph. 6.4, who is paying for the appraisal? Normally it's the buyer. Paragraph 7 is dealing with homeowners associations. This is going to be the obligation of the seller and listing agent. I will tell you, keep track of this if you can, to make sure the buyer gets all the proper documentation that is required for them to make a good decision. If they don't like something, then they can bail. Paragraph 8 is talking about the title commitment. Please always check 8.1.1. More than anything in the world, make sure that hopefully the listing agent has got a good, solid title company, because we have title companies that are going to go out of business. And if that happens, your earnest money that you've put in with them is gone. And it's a problem. So now you've got to remember to do a good check on who is going to do this. You can even call the listing agent ahead of time to make sure they're a good, strong company. And going to paragraph 8.1.3, always check will, and you can always put down seller. This is an extra policy coverage that you can see if anybody puts a lien on the day before, the day of, the day after on a property. If not, it's going to cause a major problem. It's only somewhere between $35 and $65. It's got to be on here to protect your buyer. The rest of 8 is talking about commitment, what it is, recordings, off matters, those types of things. Then on 8.4, we're talking about mineral rights and taxes, special districting, and things of that nature. Almost every area has a special taxing district that covers fire and libraries and things of that nature. But if somehow the buyer doesn't like it, there are things that you can object to. 8 again talks all the way down. On 8.7.1 is mineral rights. That's talking about property might have mineral. If you're in an acreage, it's a possibility some of these things might take place and might apply. If it's a Highlands Ranch or Castle Rock or Parker, it may not. 7 is dealing with new surveys. You want to fill your survey, 9 is dealing with your surveys. 9.1, if you have a lot and block, then you might want to have a new ILC. If it's going to be acreage, it could be a survey. You can fill these out when you have a lot and block. If you've got a townhome or a condo that says condo on any of their legal descriptions, you don't have to fill out these and you don't have to put a date in your contract. But if you've got a house or acreage, I'd always fill this out the way you see it. You check the box, ordering the survey would be buyer, who's going to pay for it, buyer, or it could be the case you ask the seller to do that. For acreage, I'd always ask the seller, and I'd always ask for them the new one. Now, they may have one, and you may do an amend extend for this paragraph and say, hey, I'm good. I'm going to use the one that was dated on whatever date. But read this and become familiar with it because you want to put it in on a house or acreage. Doesn't necessarily have to be used for a condo or a townhome. So now you go to paragraph 10, which is inspections. You can go 10, you have a seller's property disclosure that you will receive. You have any other disclosure that would be an adverse material fact against the property. And a buyer can have any kind of inspection he wants as long as he doesn't destroy the house. So again, depending on what part of the country people come from, different inspections are more important than others. When you come in California, termites are very big. Not so much if you come from the like Texas or something of that nature. But again, you can have any kind of inspection. You want to have the inspection by a certain date, and you want to resolve by a certain date, or you terminate. Please on 10.5 is insurability, which means buyer's going to get insurance. Buyer has to go and get insurance. Please do not assume that a buyer can always get insurance on a property. So you make your dates, as we'll talk about next week, so we can ensure that that buyer is going to get insurance on his or her property. Number 10.6 is due diligence. This does not have to be filled out unless there is a leased item or a basement that's filled out. You want to know about permits or things of that nature. Please, under no circumstances do you put, I want all of the warranties for the appliances. That does not go in here. That goes into additional provisions. This is only talking about leases or say something that has got to be reviewed by a buyer. Could be a lease. It could be some other things. But normally it's a lease on a solar or a alarm system or something of that nature. 10.7 is conditional sale. Now this, if you write your offer that says, hey, I have a house that's going to close on this day, it's under contract, past all the dates, Then when we talk about deadlines next week, I'll tell you what to put in there. But it does say sold and closed, so you have to put this deadline prior to the date on the other, this contract. Source of water. Do you have a copy of the water source of water at the time this offer? You don't, but it's coming. No, I don't have a well. So lead-based paint disclosure, if this property was built before January 1, 1978, then it has to have lead-based paint disclosures. All parties have to sign. If you don't sign and we're audited, you will get a $16,000 fine per person who did not sign. So it's a very big deal. Then we don't, carbon monoxides on 1011, please make sure that the carbon monoxides are there and make sure that it's there at the time of your inspection. If it's not, you put it on your inspection that they have to be put in prior to closing. But if you list something, always make sure that they're there. We don't have a meth disclosure right now. Other companies might, but we don't have one. But just say, hey, that is a question to ask anybody. Hey, do you know if meth has been cooked in this house or used? And nobody should be offended by it, but it should be a question that might want to be asked. Closing instructions should always be put together, usually by the listing agent. Almost all title companies are using the Colorado State approved forms. If it's not, then do not have your buyer sign it. 12.3, it always is the listing agent. It is not upon mutual agreement or anything of that nature. It's called listing agent has control. 13 is the transfer of title. You don't have to check any of the boxes, but if you're going to check one, check special warranty deed. It'll automatically default to that. Now, paragraph 15 is talking about closing. So on 15.2, you half and half. There's a fee that the title company charges buyer and seller, one to close the loan, one to close the real estate. It's usually running around $420 or $450, and it's a 50-50 charge. Then on 5.2 status letter, if I represent the buyers, I always check seller on both of those cases. Then on 15.4, you put 0 on local taxes, and then you can check the box none, which I failed to do, but you can check it. On 15.5, no private transfer tax, but in the high country there is. You can check none. Please remember 15.6 must be filled out. I would tell you to put in 350. You can check water district, and you can check seller. More and more of the title companies are requiring a transfer fee to put it into the new buyer's name. A lot of times it's only, I think Highlands Ranch is 150, but other places might be up to 350. Always put this number in here along with the seller checking. Now on 15.8, do not check anything in this paragraph, because when the property was listed, the title company has asked the sellers, are they a U.S. citizen? If they're not, then there are some documents that they have to fill out and some documentation that needs to be received by the title company. Because if not, your buyer is going to be responsible for the taxes that might be owed. So we want to make sure that that is checked. So it's a question for you to say to the title company, hey, have you checked and verified that they're a U.S. citizen? And then just making sure that they have done that and making sure you follow up with that, because it's going to be very important. 16 is the proration of association assessments. You check most recent mill levy and most recent assessed value for your property taxes. 16.2 is dealing with rents, and most of the time you don't have it, but if you do, then you put that, you check that box, and make sure you get the proper documents. On 16.3 is the assessment, and where I go down, it says any and all assessments prior to closing by the association will be obligation. You always check the seller, because they will get notified in mail. They will have a letter. They will make sure everything is there and make sure there are no assessments. And this deals mostly with townhomes and condos, but it could be that they live in a gated community and there could be assessments on that. 16.4, at the end of that paragraph, you want to put the word none. Do not leave it blank. Put the word none. Then on possession, I always make it painful for a seller not to get out on time. I put $500. If that seller cannot be out on time and wants a post-closing occupancy document, you check the box at the end of the paragraph. And most buyers are going to occupy their property. If there's a rental, you check the box that does not represent the buyer will occupy the property. The one at the bottom is if the box is checked, the buyer will agree to execute a post-closing occupancy agreement. I would check that box. If you find out from calling to the listing agent, the seller cannot be out at closing, then what you want to do is prepare your post-closing documents at the time of offer, so you have your contract and your post-closing document going over, so you can negotiate the terms in that document so you don't have any fights later. And I strongly suggest that you do that. 17, this is the holdover portion. You can check the will or will not, whatever works for you. You also have on 19, that would be the insurance losses or, a hailstorm or something like that. You want to read those paragraphs and make sure that these are paragraphs that you understand. Legal, mediation, earnest money dispute, termination, who has the right to do that when, what survives the contract. On paragraph 27, how are things electronically you're going to possibly do it. Our closings are going to be different because now the buyer and seller and the closer are the only people that can be in there. So it's just one buyer, the buyer and the closer, and the seller and the closer. Agents cannot be there. But what I would strongly suggest is you be on the phone at the same time that they're closing. Get your copy of your documents ahead of time and make sure that they're comfortable with that process. Number 30, additional provisions, is where if you have a transaction coordinator, again, you want to put that information in there. Many of you do not fill out paragraph 31.1.
Donna?
Put down earnest money. Why do they do that? Did somebody ask a question?
Yes, I did. I'm going back to number 18. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
It says on there, and I thought we weren't ever supposed to use this, on 18.2, computation of period of days deadline. It says 3 days after MEC. I thought we weren't supposed to use MEC.
We are not supposed to do that. Please ignore it.
So should I?
Do not do that. Do not do that. Thank you.
That's all.
Yeah, don't ever use MEC, period. Always check will and always be specific if there's a date that it follows.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Yeah, no problem. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Okay, 31.1. Please, you guys are famous for not filling out 31.1 and 2. Put down earnest money, source of water, lead-based paint, if it applies. Also put in here right now, COVID-19 addendum. It has to be part of this contract, and I would send it over when I put an offer in. Do that, so we're all set. It says on those 2 paragraphs, one for buyer, one for seller, in the event of. It doesn't mean we're going to do it, just means if you need it, it's already set in place. 31.2, put in seller's property disclosure, put in square foot, put in closing instructions. This way, We know what has to come in, and if it's not coming, you want to ask the question why. This 31 is where most people put their NAs. They don't even leave it blank, they just do NAs. Please don't do that. Fill it out, put it in, be specific. The more specific you are, the less opportunities of issues you're going to have. Then paragraph 32 is where you as the agent, or where the agent sign. What I would encourage you to do, the first portion is yours because you're the buyer's agent. No, you don't have the earnest money. I'm working as a buyer's agent. Listing brokerage firm is going to pay your commission. You have all your documentation filled out. I would also fill out paragraph 33. No, they don't have, the listing agent doesn't have the earnest money. Sellers, they're acting as a seller's agent. Compensation comes from the seller. Fill it all out. They are very lazy on the other side. So if you manage to make sure, the only thing they have to do is put their signature to this contract, and I would say a third of them even can't sign their name. So it's very frustrating for all of us. But go ahead and fill that out. You know it's done, and then they can put their name and signature there. It's the only thing they need. Then I don't have to reject your offers because the selling agent didn't sign, or the listing agent didn't sign. Now our next document is called Post-Closing Occupancy Agreement. It's filled out with the seller's and buyer's name, what county they're in. Number 2 says whatever the date of the contract is. And be sure to make note of paragraph 3. Let's say it's 10 days, 30 days, or 60 days. Whatever the dates are there, when we get to additional provisions, I want you to be more specific, and I'll tell you in a minute. Rest of this you could read through. On paragraph 8 is what is the per day amount. Well, you take the buyer's PITI, divide by 30, that's the date you put in there. That's the date that the buyer and seller, what you think is going to be agreeable to that seller. And that's important to do that up front, because if you get an elderly couple that have a house they've lived in for 30 years and all of a sudden somebody says you're going to pay me $2,000 for a month to live there, they're going to get very testy. So we want to make sure we clear all the air prior to getting our contract signed and everybody understands where they are. Again, number 10, I match with whatever I put in the offer, I put in here too. Then 11, it's who's going to pay for water and sewer charges. You could say seller because they're the one living in it. And 12 is seller because they're living in it. Now, that could get a little sticky, and sometimes it's only less than $10 to do certain things. I wouldn't worry about if it's a short time. If it's a 30-day or 60-day, yes, the seller is always going to be responsible for that. Number 13 is the most important thing. Sellers have to have renters' policies on this property as of the day of closing, and will maintain it, and they will make sure. If that house burns down, the buyer is covered, the seller is not. Make sure that 13 is used and will be always done. Again, in the amount, they have a security deposit on 15. It may or may not happen. It could be 1,000, it could be 300, whatever the amount is short, or nothing. If it's a short time, it might be nothing, but that's up to you. Now, additional provisions, even though I have none at this time, is where I would put down referencing paragraph 3. The 10 days, make sure that everybody understands that 10 days is going to be April 30th. At 10 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning to exchange keys. Put it in additional provisions so everybody knows that date, not because your 10 days and somebody else's 10 days will not be the same. Always put it in there that that 10 days represents the final date to be April 30th at 8 o'clock in the morning. When you do that, you have less issues. Then all parties will sign. Again, if you negotiate this up front, you're going to have less problems, less issues. Everybody agrees to the date they're actually going to get out of the property, and everything is a much smoother path. The next document is called earnest money receipt. Now, because of COVID-19, you physically are not going to be able to drop your earnest money to a title company. However, you can call the title company and get wiring instructions. I would strongly suggest the buyer calls directly the title company so they know how to have the wiring instructions set up to whatever. And then get a receipt, ask the title company to send over verification that the funds were wired in. That's the document that gets uploaded into Command. Our next document is called notice to terminate. So we have our buyers, we put them under contract. They went through and found 100 different things that are wrong with the house. They don't want the house anymore. And you check the appropriate box and you send this over. Who's terminating? It's going to be the buyer. The buyer signs, the seller does not. Buyer signs because the buyers are the ones who are terminating it. Then you, along with this document, you send earnest money release. How much? Who's it going to go back to? That it can be mailed to a buyer these days with COVID-19. Nobody can go there. It's going to be difficult to get your check. So a mailed check would be probably the way it's going to process. Again, if this release is not signed by all parties, that check will not be released. So hopefully there'll be no fights, but there could be. Hopefully not. Our next document is called a title-related objection notice. This is when something in the title that could be a liened item that can't be cleared, then you want to terminate it. It could be the leased solar panels is not acceptable to the buyer, and that's under due diligence, and you could terminate on due diligence because those things are liened items against a property. So this has to be sent and signed, and then you will terminate it. Next document is appraisal value objection. This is a document that is used when the appraisal, it does not meet the agreed upon value of the agreed upon price of the property. So you want to send a copy of the appraisal. I wouldn't send a letter, I do the appraisal, and then try to get it together and make sure that you've given them notice. You want to terminate, you can terminate under appraised value, but try to hold it together and make sure everybody is in agreement on how to do it, amend, extend, changing the selling price or something of that nature. But this is a document that we will probably see used more after COVID-19 because the values, I think, will readjust a bit here. So let's make sure you're familiar with that. The next one is called a buyer acknowledgement in inspection and home warranty. This document is used, and I would use it when your buyer says, hey, I don't want an inspection, I don't want an appraisal because I'm paying cash, or I don't want a warranty for something. Make sure you get them saying, hey, you declined, they don't want a home warranty, they didn't want a home inspection, but get them to sign this because they can't come back to you later and say, hey, you didn't tell me that XYZ, I should have had my inspection and I discovered something broke or whatever the case may be. But if they sign this, then they have waived their rights and they're not going to come back to you and say, hey, why didn't you tell me about this? Okay. Your next document is called closing instructions. These are the documents that your buyer should sign, and how they're filled out is you have the name of the buyer, the seller, and here the address, the date of the contract on line 16. Then you have title, agrees, you put down closing instructions. Yes, everybody agrees on paragraph 2. Then you go through and read it. It pretty much is self-explanatory. What happens on closing fees? number 5 is that's the $420 that's going to be split 50-50 with your closing according to the contract. How does the seller want to get their proceeds? I would say you probably want to try electronic wiring, but no emails can be sent between you and the buyers, or sellers, I'm sorry. You want to make sure that seller talks directly with the title company because fraud is happening every second and more so now. So please be careful that how you do that. It talks about the earnest money, return of earnest money, any disputes, the FERPA documents, anything about that nature. Anything additional provisions would be where you might want to put in, this is where you have your transaction coordinator that would be coordinating anything between buyers, sellers, and title company, that type of thing. Normally not too much in here. Might be an estate sale, who is the person who's going to sign on behalf of the state, that kind of thing. And the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory. This is a document that you have and sign at closing, no exceptions. Now, who has any questions?
Did you see that document signed at closing?
Well, I would prefer it prior to closing. When the time of contract is when I would like it. So if you're the selling agent, you need to ask the other side for closing instructions so you can have your buyer sign this as quickly as possible. Because there's so many things signing at closing, it just makes life a little easier for everybody.
So better just at the time of the contract?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
Christy. Yes. Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yep, no problem. Who else got another question?
Hey, Donna, this is Larry. I have one. It's on the contract to buy and sell. Just one quick question on 10.6.1, the due diligence. Do
Yes.
we check that even if there's no due diligence documents, or do we just
No.
leave it?
You leave it blank.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you only check it if it's required.
Okay. And that
For
should
you.
be listed in the MLS, correct? Like if the solar panels or security systems?
Yeah, there could be a solar panel, there could be an alarm system, there could be somebody finished a basement and you want to know, did they pull permits? You'd like to review them. And you want to put in that paragraph that buyer's going to review it. They have 2 days to review and accept, like a lease on a solar system or an alarm system or a Culligan system, that kind of thing. Give them time to review and accept. If they don't accept, then you want to terminate the contract.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Who else has another question? No more questions? You guys are great. Well, next week, what we're going to do is we are going to do our dates and deadlines. So that will help you walk through the dates and deadlines that you've got and how to understand them. And I'm almost thinking that you might put a date and deadline for your COVID-19 to be signed. We have some problems with people not wanting to sign it, but I don't know why, but there you go. So anybody have any other questions? If not,
thanks.
Yeah, are you good, Larry?
I am, thank you.
Okay. So if you have questions, reach out to me. My cell is 303-521-8300 if you have any questions. Other than that, I hope to see you all next week on Monday. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Thanks, Donna. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Donna.
Bye.
Thanks, Donna.
You're welcome.